A Japanese Army Unit 731 underground horror bunker is found in China. This barbaric remnant from the Second World War was discovered in the northeast part of the country where Imperial Japan occupied China between the years 1931 to 1945, resulting in the mass slaughter of an estimated 3 to 10 million Chinese. Of those millions, about 12,000 were killed by scientists working for Unit 731, which defended its monstrous atrocities on the grounds of public health research, once again bringing to mind the horrors of science untethered to Judeo-Christian morality or ethics. Without that bedrock, you get the mindset that just because you can means you should, and the ad hoc justifications that your research can theoretically save lives down the road, so the ends justify the means in killing the few to save the many. We know it doesn't work that way. Evil means create poisoned ends. So once the idea percolated among Japanese scientists that they could, quote-unquote, save lives by conducting the most grotesque experiments imaginable, and that they could conduct those experiments on races that they believed to be inferior, torturing them in the process, and then using that forbidden knowledge to kill the rest of their countrymen, well, for all too many of these Unit 731 scientists, that became a dangerously tempting elixir to drink of and to quell the conscience. And this recent find near the Chinese city of Anda bears this out, as it appears to be the largest of the unit's research sites. And just as a disclaimer before choosing to watch on, please be aware that this segment will be full of details about torture, so make that decision for yourself on whether or not to watch on. So acknowledging that, built back in 1941, archaeologists have so far partially unearthed a U-shaped structure, which is about 108 feet long and 67 feet wide, from which numerous rooms and tunnels branch off from. While those parts of the structure are still buried, the team is already categorizing which areas likely served as laboratories, as dissection rooms, dining areas, holding cells, and more. As Live Science explains about those victims, which included men, women, and children, mostly of Chinese descent, but also Koreans, Russians, and American captives, they had to endure testing, which included, quote, grenades, bacterial bombs, flamethrowers, and chemical weapons. Individuals were also exposed to dehydration, killed inside spinning centrifuges, injected with animal blood, zapped with x-rays, vivisected without anesthesia, and kept inside low-pressure chambers until their eyeballs burst. Plague-infected fleas bred in Unit 731's labs were also dropped by low-flying planes over Chinese cities, causing disease outbreaks that killed hundreds of thousands of people, end quote. Where the article says zapped with x-rays, they mean at dangerous doses and for prolonged exposure. When it comes to vivisection, that means cutting someone open, like during a surgery, but while they're still alive and not anesthetized or sedated, so they can see their organs being removed and examined. Other horrors include gangrene, limbs being amputated and reattached to the wrong side of the body, women and even male prisoners being forcibly raped by those with syphilis to test the spread of the bacteria and its disease progression, being starved to see its effects on the human body, having parts of their body frozen until it became like a block of ice and then quickly thrown over a fire or doused with hot water. Others were crushed by heavy objects to test crash injuries, and still more were sent to gas chambers for scientists to test the effects of blister agents and nerve gas firsthand. One veteran of this unit later told the New York Times in 1995 that he remembered seeing samples or tokens of the prisoners at a separate location of containers filled with their internal organs, feet, or heads with labels reading American, Englishman, Frenchman, Chinese, Korean, or Mongolian. Obviously, the point here was for none of the prisoners to live. Those that survived the unsurvivable experiments but had outlived their usefulness to the doctors of death would be shot or killed by chemical injections. We know about the Nazi atrocities exposed at Nuremberg during the trials, well, except for the few scientists allowed to come here covertly to work at NASA and other U.S. scientific government agencies in Operation Paperclip. But when it comes to the cover-up of Imperial Japan's version of Dr. Mengele, quote, following Japan's surrender in September 1945, the U.S. covered up evidence of the gruesome experiments and secretly granted many of Unit 731's leaders immunity from prosecution for war crimes in exchange for their research. Much of this information was later taken to Fort Detrick in Maryland, the center of the U.S. Cold War biological weapons program between 1943 and 1969, end quote. And with that, I'm all out of time for tonight. Hopefully you learned something interesting to take with you into tomorrow. Until then, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Truth Social at Tipping Point OAN, or on my personal account, Nefertari_25. If you like the show, please send us feedback at tippingpoint@oann.com. And make sure to subscribe to OAN Live and to download the app for iOS, Android, Apple TV, and for other devices to watch Tipping Point wherever you go. And OAN Live features video on demand so you never have to miss a show. So as always, thank you. Have a great night.